Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to yet another 40k lore video. Today we are going to be looking at Black Crusades, which is an integral part of modern 40k, and a rather interesting event. You see, in virtually any other science fiction universe, a Black Crusade would be a galactic extinction level event. An unstoppable flood of demons and legions of traitor space marines transported across the void in gargantuan spaceships, including the Blackstone fortresses, which are pretty much the Death Star from Star Wars if you remove the ridiculous weak spots. Oh, and also, the ships themselves are also essentially just gargantuan demonic life forms at this point, as they have been possessed by demonic entities from the warp, turning what was once just good old-fashioned steel and plasma engines and stuff into a massive-ass void-faring monsters with giant plasma hearts that fire lasers of pure undulated hatred. Imagine this shit happening, for example, in the Star Wars universe. How well do you think stormtroopers would deal with boarding parties of Chaos Space Marines? Or even better, let's imagine Star Trek away teams trying to take on fucking demons. Oh, it would be glorious, if excessively short-lived. If anything, the Star Wars universe probably has a slightly bigger chance just because they've built some truly redonkulously large ships. Of course, the problem with very large ships is that it's virtually impossible for boarding torpedoes to actually miss the damn thing, and I'm pretty sure a single squad of 10 Chaos Marines could probably take on the entire crew of an Eclipse-class Star Destroyer. In all due essence, the point I'm trying to make is that if a Black Crusade hit pretty much any other fantasy universe ever, there would be very little left of said fantasy universe. In 40k, however, it's Tuesday. In 40k, there's been fucking 13 of these things, and they haven't even crossed the first bloody hurdle yet. Granted, a lot of that is down to the illustrious leader of these particular crusades, and don't you worry, we're going to be getting into him. Oh yes, we are, because before we get into the whys and hows of a Black Crusade, we need to talk about the who's, and specifically who. And of course, no video on the Black Crusade would be finished without a brief look at Abaddon the Harmless, the most disappointing son in the history of children. Somewhere out there in the galaxy, there's a dead woman that's still shaking her head and sighing heavily over having spawned such an absurd amount of utter fail. He's also one of the finest examples of GW incompetence out there. Or, well, he was, and then the fuck times rolled around, but even so, if the fucking was a 10, then Ezekiel Abaddon is a 9. Okay, let's actually explain, shall we? We can save the proper bile for an episode dedicated entirely to Abaddon the Armless. So, Abaddon, the despoiler of plotlines and spawner of memes, is the least competent space marine to have ever turned from the Emperor's light. He was one of the arch-traitor Horus's favoured concubines, or advisors, depending on if you ask the fluff or anyone that actually plays 40k, and essentially took over Horus's job as the arch-traitor, and now leads what remains of the Sons of Horus, though now they call themselves the Black Legion, after Abaddon had a particularly massive bitch fit, and decided that Horus was really not particularly good at leading them anyway, despite the fact that Horus conquered most of the Imperium, and Abaddon has so far conquered, a vegetable patch or something? I'll get into the details surrounding these events at a later time, though, as this video is really just intended to explain what a Black Crusade is, but it is necessary that you hear about Abaddon, as well, as he will inevitably come up in any conversation about the Black Crusades. So, to return to the point, after the failure of the Great Heresy, most of the remaining traitors fled into the Eye of Terror, and many of these legions were more or less bereft of leadership, either voluntarily or through the machinations that split apart so many of the traitor legions, internal power struggles, and so on. Abaddon, however, refused to admit defeat, and blamed their losses entirely on Horus being a bit of a bitch, and so began preparations to topple the weakling Imperium himself, figuring that this would be a pretty simple job. He then went on to fail miserably not once, not twice, not even thrice, but 12 times. He has succeeded with his goals once, that being the 13th Black Crusade, and that was only because he set the bar for success so remarkably low than a mouth-breathing half-wit with severe brain trauma and a live shark shoved so far up his ass that you can hear the Jaws theme music coming out of his fucking nostrils. Could still have done it, and probably would have done a better bloody job at it as well. And that is why Abaddon has received the name of Abaddon the Harmless. And yet, G-Dubs keeps insisting that he is somehow dangerous. You see, the fine examples of Shellfish over at GW have decided that Abaddon is supposed to be the biggest threat Chaos has to offer, but at the same time they can't have him actually win, because, well, winning would mean he wiped out the Imperium, which would make it somewhat hard to sell more Space Marines. So instead, they keep inventing reasons for why he actually succeeded while failing miserably. Along the lines of, haha, you may have killed all of my dudes and once again defeated my ploy to get past even the fucking doorstep. But really, all I was after was this salt shaker. And then he would run off to his room cackling like a severely drunk grandparent with a bad case of the cray-craze. To be fair though, he has had some awesome moments here and there, and the Horus Heresy novels are slowly recovering some of his image as a half-competent commander with at least the merest hint of balls. And his tabletop model is quite the beast with some truly nasty special rules, even if the arms have a nasty habit of falling off, thereby granting him his second name, Abaddon the Armless. But still, he will absolutely devour anything put in front of him at a speed that would put an obese man at a McDonald's restaurant to deep and everlasting shame. And, of course, there's also the Crusade itself to consider. The overall commander of the Endeavour might have the cognitive capabilities of a fish on land, but that hardly really matters, as most of his forces just do whatever they fucking want anyways. All Abaddon really has to do is try to make sure they all leave the Eye of Terror at roughly the same time, and in roughly the same direction he wants them to. In fact, it could be said with a fair bit of confidence that Abaddon's greatest success have come from simply pointing someone more competent in the right direction. And this is where the real danger of a Black Crusade is located. Endless hordes of Chaos cultists by the billions, and ocean-sized formations of demons spearheaded by legions of traitor Space Marines. And while many of these fallen angels are fresh generations of vat-grown Marines, there's still a hard core of veterans from the heresy itself amongst them. Combat veterans with quite literally thousands of years of combat experience. And their numbers also contain such characters that words like monsters or demon just don't really cover it. Demon princes, possessed titans, along with characters like Lucius the Eternal or Karn the Betrayer. These former legionnaires were considered some of the best fighters in the Imperium at a time where Primarchs walked the galaxy. And speaking of Primarchs, no demon Primarch would ever submit to Abaddon's command, of course, but they have occasionally ventured outside the Eye, and a Black Crusade led by one of these godlike creatures of raw destruction is an incredible threat. When the demon Primarch Angron manifested himself on the planet Armageddon, it took the combined might of a Space Wolves Great Company and the Grey Knights to banish him back to the warp. Essentially, it took a couple thousand Space Marines to deal with this bastard. And you may be wondering, if the Eye of Terror contains such monstrous forces, why isn't the Imperium long since broken and burned? Well, like in so many cases, the simplest answer is often the best. Even during the Great Heresy, there was extreme sedition within the traitor legions, with the various legions and their primarchs doing whatever they wanted for the most part. And this was under the leadership of Horus Lupercal. If he could manage to control these burgeoning chaos forces, even at their most docile and recently turned, then the current leadership within the Eye of Terror doesn't stand a snowball's chance in hell. And then, of course, there's the Cadian Gate. After the heresy, the Imperium established several fortress worlds and chapter homeworlds near the Eye of Terror to halt further Chaos incursions. This is achieved by controlling the few relatively stable warp routes out of the immediate area. As long as the planet of Cadia stands, the Chaos Forces simply cannot translate enough ships from the system to be effective. And invading Cadia is no small task, as the entire planet is essentially one massive bunker complex, studded with super heavy anti-orbital weapons and garrisoned by millions, if not billions, of combat-hardened Cadians, along with several Titan legions and entire regiments of super heavy tanks. And all of these ridiculous forces are entrenched in defensive positions that have been built and improved upon over the course of thousands of years. We're talking minefields that stretches for miles, artillery bunkers for every single area of the planet. If there is a part of Cadia that is flat, it is within the range of one artillery battery or another. Landing troops on Cadia essentially means that the troops will be under continuous fire for every single moment of what remains of their lives. On the way down in their drop pods, they're going to be under flak fire. The moment they land, they're going to be shelled. And then they're going to have to fight their way into gigantic armoured complexes which passes for cities on Cadia. And if you thought a hive city would be hard to take, these things are on a whole another level. Essentially, a Cadian city is nothing but a massive pre-positioned bunker complex. Every single position has been rigged to be immediately destroyed if lost to the enemy. Every single position is watched by 2 further positions. There is not an inch of ground on Cadia that is not covered by some sort of weapon system or another. And that's if you can even get troops onto the planet. As I mentioned, Cadia has so many super heavy anti-orbital weaponry that even a fully fledged Chaos fleet is going to take incredible amounts of casualties even trying to land. The losses will number in the millions before the first heretic boot even reaches Cadian soil. And even then, there's enough troops to have brought Cadia to the edge of defeat on several occasions. But of course, all of this assumes that the invading forces have actually made it past the Navy. The Cadian system and the other fortress systems around the Eye of Terror are of course heavily patrolled by the Imperial Navy, with further Imperial Navy and Guard forces on permanent standby in neighbouring systems. Any Black Crusade is essentially in a race against the clock to break through Cadia, thereby opening a breach through which the full might of Chaos can flood out before the irresistible might of thousands upon thousands of Imperial Guard regiments and dozens of Astartes chapters can grind them down and back into the Eye. In all due reality, the Cadian Gate has been fortified to such a ludicrous extent that it is virtually unbreakable by anything short of a unified Chaos push, led by the remaining traitor Primarchs. And that scenario is fortunately functionally impossible, especially now that we know that some of the traitor Primarchs might not be what they are originally made out to be. Nevertheless, though, a Black Crusade led by even a single Demon Primarch would be an event to rival the threat of the Hive fleets, or a resurgent of the Orc Beast. We are, after all, talking about the military might on a level not seen since the Great Crusade. The Chaos Space Marines might have lost a fair bit of their discipline and cohesion during the heresy, but legion-sized formations of them should never be underestimated. And now that they can also use screening forces of billions of Chaos traitors of the more human variety, along with hundreds of thousands of demons, not to mention massive demon-possessed titans, and quite literally millions of tanks. Because here's the thing, the Eye of Terror does not abide by the rules of the normal universe. In the normal universe, there is a set amount of equipment that can be produced in a set amount of time. For example, let us say that Factory A can create 100 tanks in 7 days. In the Eye of Terror, 7 days might have passed in reality, but 7 years might have passed within the Eye, and that factory has been grinding out tanks for all 7 of those years, along with the crew needed to serve it, as within the Eye of Terror there are so-called demon worlds, with what could in some cases be considered a human population. Essentially, I'll get into demon worlds some other time, but a demon Primarch, or a demon of enough power to have a demon world of his own, can choose to build upon it whatever he wants. For example, there is a demon world described in the Ultramarines books. This demon world has a population of humans that are used for various nefarious purposes. There are so-called flaying shacks on this world, where the population are herded inside of these shacks, where they are, well, they're called flaying shacks. I'll give you one guess as to what happens inside of them, and are then used as raw materials to create soldiers, to create demon man hybrids that are used as shock troops. The resources gathered within are also used for other purposes, too horrifying to discuss on YouTube, and I'm not actually kidding there. The shit they came up with in that particular book series was, rather uncomfortable. In short, within the Eye of Terror, the Chaos Forces can create all the equipment they want, both the men to operate it and the weapons themselves. There is literally no limit, other than Abaddon's rather limited patience, to how much stuff can be made, how many ships can be created, how many tanks can be manufactured, how many guns can be produced in the infernal forges, not to mention aircrafts, personnel weapons, ammunition, etc. A Chaos Crusade should never be underestimated, if for no other reason than because it is an endless threat. There is no limit to how much shit could pour out of the Eye of Terror, and generally speaking, if you've got enough stuff to throw at something, you will eventually be successful, even though it might take tens of thousands of years. Even if it is led by a bleating sheep with a broom up its arse. I've been Arch, thank you very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.